Things have been changing at the Walt Disney Company for years. Under the direction of Bob Iger, traditions and the foundations of the company itself have seemingly shifted out from under those who remember a yesteryear at Disney where things were not quite the same. Instead, it was a company built upon sincerity, true respect, even to the point that when other companies looked at partnering with Disney or even taking it over, they came away saying they work on a different foundation entirely than the rest of corporate America. That is now vastly different. And we're going to talk about the real reasons why Disney shifted their cast member traditions, their keys, their standards. And folks, I'm here to tell you, it's not the virtue signal that Disney said. All right, welcome back to another video of excellence here on the WDW Pro channel, where we endeavor daily to explain entertainment and keep you ahead of the culture curve. It is a joy that you are sharing your time with us. Thank you so much. All right, folks, it's a fantastic video today. We're going to talk about the Disney traditions and how they were changed, but more importantly, why. Joining us is Vash Sky. He is the co-anchor over on That Park Place. Also, you can find him on Theme Park Universe, and he is a universe of knowledge, perhaps even a universe of energy when it comes to all his things that he's doing on here on YouTube, if Pro can talk. Vash, welcome back.
Well, I'm happy to be back, Pro. Thank you so much for having me. Universe of Energy. I like that little, inclusion there. We're going to be talking about a little bit of inclusion.
Inclusion. Yes, we are. All right, well, Vash, we're going to be talking based on what I have discovered from a very in-depth conversation I had with someone who was a cast member for years. We're talking about a career that goes all the way back into the 1970s. They have worked at various Disney parks, and they had much to say to me about what is happening and why things are not the way they once were. I also want to preface this by saying that for the very first time this past year, I have begun noticing and talking about the fact that cast member standards are not what they once were. I've always talked very highly about the cast members, and I continue to talk highly about the vast majority of the cast members. But something has changed when you go down Main Street and you find that there are tattoos of tears on one of the cast members. Folks out there, I bet you can figure out what that means if you look it up. But that was bizarre to me, and I found some other examples of less than high-quality cast membering. In fact, one of our reporters on That Park Place even had a cast member walk up to her and start telling her about her family problems that she's experiencing without prompting, without request, and that just never happened in the past, although we wish that cast member well. So I want to start off today with some of the changes that came about back on April 13th, 2021. And this came out from Josh D'Amaro, of course, the head of Disney Parks Experiences and Products. A person, by the way, that I think is very unaccomplished in that position. I don't think that he has succeeded whatsoever, although like Bob Iger, he has lots of charisma, and like all humans on Earth, I wish him well. A place where everyone is welcome is the name of this article that or PR release. It says, Walt Disney spoke these words during the dedication of the Disneyland Resort in 1955. Today, more than 65 years later, they continue to inspire us and remind us that the magic we must make include everyone. It's important to share how we're creating a place where everyone is welcome. Now, folks, this is old news, of course, but he goes on to talk about the 4 keys that had been familiar to all cast members: safety, courtesy, show efficiency, and then they added a new 5th key to it. And that 5th key, of course, what is it, Vash?
Inclusion.
That's right. As you alluded to earlier, it is indeed inclusion.
Right.
All right, Vash, tell us, why did Disney originally present that they were going to add this 5th key? What was the whole deal?
Well, you'll know that this, I believe, was announced starting early 2021. And, well, as you know, the summer of 2020.
Summer of love, Vash. Summer of love.
Summer of love. It was it was quite the controversial time, let's say.
Contentious.
contentious. Yes, that's a great way, great word you can use for the summer or the year of 2020. And so, coming out of that year, obviously, many corporations were a little bit more mindful, let's say, when it came to race relations among their employees, among their customers, and so forth. And so, the Walt Disney Company followed suit and added this fifth key, this inclusion key. Now, I had already stated at the time that I wasn't quite, let's say, I wasn't quite taken in by this reasoning, right? Obviously, in 2020, we saw the labor market just get completely just decimated by the events that happened that year. And so with the reopening of Disneyland in April of 2021, and obviously the relaunch of Walt Disney World that would occur over the next 2 years, the labor market was definitely very, very tight, right? And so I had always surmised that the reason why they were adjusting their standards when it came to the Disney look and why they were, let's say, including this fifth key here, was to increase the pool of cast members for which they would hire. And so I never bought into this idea that previously the Walt Disney Company wasn't welcoming, and now they are magically welcoming. Previously, the Walt Disney Company had been very accommodating when it came to just about everybody that sought a job at the Walt Disney Company in various roles all across, either for cast member roles or at the executive leadership positions. So I didn't feel that inclusion key needed to be necessarily, let's say, emphasized in the way they were doing it. And the changes to the Disney look, well, we have seen how that's affected life at the parks for not just cast members, but for also guests.
So, Vash, let me ask you this. If Disney introduced an inclusion key, does that mean that Disney was non-inclusive before that?
That is the assertion. That's kind of what I what I had alluded to before. It would seem to me that, yeah, if you are emphasizing it now, well, then I think the logical deduction that you can make is that they weren't inclusive before. So I always found that a little bit problematic.
So there's one of two ways to look at this, folks. Either when they added this fifth key of inclusion, either they were declaring that the company had been non-inclusive before, which would go right along with what the company had been doing, which is disparaging their past. You can still see that on Disney Plus when you try to pull up their content, and it'll give a disclaimer that their classic material is inappropriate. Or the other option is that it was simply a slogan and that in reality, they didn't care about the inclusion part. They needed to find workers. And Vash, according to this source who had been there and worked at very high levels inside the Disney parks, you were exactly right. And yes,
Wow.
The Disney look also comes down to it. And yes, Disney traditions as well. You can see this article called Disney Traditions, The First Step to Endless Possibilities from Disney's Parks blogs. Go check it out, folks, and just read through this and see how the language has changed in terms of what Disney traditions once was versus sort of what the focus is now. But Vash, here's what I was told.
Please.
Through the 70s and 80s and even into the early 90s, it was not easy to become a Disney cast member. You went through a tremendous amount of screening. You were expected to be fantastic. The pay was not great. The pay was not good. But the perks were awesome. And having Disney on your resume really meant something. Not only that, but you were surrounded by an environment of sincerity, and the people in the Disney company actually treated you like a giant family, and they meant it. And it was something that was carried all the way from Walt into those 80s and early 90s. But then what changed, according to this individual, started with Eisner, continued with Iger, and it was a not evolution, but regression of the company into the typical corporate structure. As that happened, the lack of pay meant that once you disincentivize people to join Disney because it no longer meant something on their resumes, and because the perks were diminished greatly, and because the level of respect shared between one another was gone, then all you had left was pay, and the pay was not good. Right. And so Disney began to struggle to fill their parks with cast members and these other things. Also, under Eisner and Iger, the parks exploded, especially Walt Disney World, in terms of the number of people necessary to keep these things running. And so, according to this source, especially after the pandemic, and especially after individuals did not return back to Walt Disney World, and folks, we're not going to talk about why some people did not return back to their roles at Walt Disney World, but after that did not happen, well, there was an exacerbation of how do we get people to work for us? Anybody, please. And so that is when they dropped the standards. That is when they introduced this new key. And according to the source, Vash, the way that Disney looked at this was, if we just come out and drop the requirements, and so you can have facial hair, you can have visible tattoos, you can have any number of things. Biological men can dress in the dresses of the Haunted Mansion, and biological women can dress in. In other words, do whatever you wish, folks. You need to work for us. If they did that, and they did that all by themselves, and there was no other announcement, it would have come off as very negative towards Disney. And so then the thinking was, well, what if we announce this as an inclusion incentive? So it's completely based about money.
Yes.
It's totally about money. Don't raise the pay more than you have to, right? Haggle with the unions, but keep the pay low. Don't go back to the standards and practices that we had at the Disney parks that made us special. Don't do that. That costs money too. Instead, open the floodgates to anybody and everybody who will work for us, even if they would never have qualified previously. And we'll get a win-win because we're going to announce this using the language of DEI, ESG, everybody is welcome, inclusivity for all, and thus Disney masked over their desperate monetary gamble with inclusivity. Vash, you don't seem surprised.
I apologize to you, Pro. I didn't mean to step on your point there. Now, folks, if you're listening, we have done no prep together whatsoever. I did not know that this was the big scoop. That
I think what it really indicates is how closely you have been listening and paying attention and talking with the folks down on the ground at the parks. I think it's fantastic that you already had an idea of where this would go.
And you can go back to recordings that I've done on other channels and so forth, reiterating this point that the dropping of the standards of the Disney look, the changes to the traditions, the introduction of this inclusion key was all about labor. We had heard headlines in early 2021 about the very, very tight labor market coming out of the events of the pandemic and so forth. And so when you're looking at a pool of cast members that you need to run these parks, let's say over 30,000 at Disneyland Resort or even over 100,000 at Walt Disney World, well, if you're not going to increase pay, what are you going to do? And that's what they did. And the shielding of this by touting inclusion and so forth and making this kind of new DEI initiative, let's say, was very shrewd by Disney because that provided them cover from criticism. And I think we'll remember back at that time. Actually, yes, there was an article that was released, I believe, was it the Orlando Sentinel, Pro, from a person who was very critical of these changes in the Disney standard, let's say, and he was lambasted on the internet. It was to show that if you speak out against this, you are going to be attacked for this. But everybody who was very in the know understood. I think, or could logically deduce what this might have been about, and to have confirmation on this now, I think is absolutely fascinating. I did do a follow-up with a contact that I have at the Disneyland Resort and said, hey, I suspect that the changes in Disney look, because they were very, they weren't big fans of it either. Going back years for this one, for somebody that I knew that had been working with the company for a long time, they were very put off by the changes to the Disney standard and so forth. And I asked them, I said, look, I think this was done for hiring purposes. Did the hiring let's say percentages or the pool at which they were expanding to include more people, right? People with tattoos, people with facial hair. Did that move the needle in terms of their hiring? And they said no.
Well, that's a good point. And what it really did is it opened the door, Vash, to individuals who are either one, lazy, or two, are activists. Now, I'm not trying to claim that even the majority of cast members are like this. This would be a distinct minority, but it certainly has an impact. And what was relayed to me is there's like a microcosm over at the Haunted Mansion that we mentioned before, where once biological men could dress in the dresses, and once biological women could dress in the men's stuff, what that did was it allowed for those who said, well, I identify as non-binary, I'm going to mix and match. It opened the door where Disney could not say no to them. And then what happened is that the lazies began to realize, oh, well, I can do that too because they can't discriminate against me. So therefore, I'm going to put together the pieces of the costume that are the most comfortable and least cumbersome. And so that's what they did. And that's happening at other places as well. And then on the activist side of this, it allowed some individuals who wanted to be seen and wanted to be provocateurs.
Right.
It allowed them to push the limits and then attempt to get positions where they would be most likely to get attention via social media, via the press, etc. And it's created this giant headache for Disney. But Disney did this because they were desperate for anybody. And I was told, the screening process now is basically just, can you work for us? Do you have a pulse? Please come work for us.
And that, I think that's reflected by the, let's say, the customer service standards at the parks right now. Walt Disney World was actually okay, but Disneyland really took a hit because it was closed for so long, 412 days. Rehiring those people back, a lot of those people had, found jobs elsewhere at that point. So that was like, it was crunch time. We had to get at least 20,000 people in the door right away to get this place.
Vash, are you saying that there's a distinct difference right now in the cast member quality in Disneyland and Disney World?
I would say so, absolutely.
Okay,
Disneyland only got about
both,
half. Oh, I've been to both. I've been to Walt Disney World recently, and the cast members out there are far more well-adjusted, I'd say, far more friendly than what Disneyland has right now. And look, maybe you can make the argument that even Walt Disney World, where it is at right now, is below par, let's say, for what we have expected from Disney in the past.
Majorly.
But you can only imagine how bad Disneyland is then. If I'm saying without any, it's bad, folks.
Let's reiterate
really,
here.
Really bad.
Let's reiterate. Most cast members do a phenomenal job.
They do.
For not fantastic pay. They do it because they want to bring joy to the guests who are attempting to make memories with their families. And we commend the vast majority of cast members. What we're saying here is that Disney, as a result of being desperate, introduced a mechanism by which it allows in individuals who are not of the type of quality that, they should be cast members, because they don't care. They care about gaming the system. They care about getting the most out of the company with the least input.
Correct.
And they also use the company as a means by which to evoke some sort of creative outlet with bizarre beliefs, bizarre appearances, etc. I'll give you one more example, Vash.
Please.
I've said this before. I went into Disney at one point. I won't say which park unless we give away who this is. This individual had a visible giant tattoo of an opposing mascot. So that was interesting.
Wow. And to give people an idea about how crazy that is, I mean, previously, if you had any tattoos on you whatsoever, or were visible, let's say on your arms or hands, that was immediate disqualification. I mean, there was no getting past that point. And originally they said, oh, well, tattoos are only going to be the size of a hand. And I don't know. I mean, I think they take that pretty liberally, let's say.
Big hands were on this individual. Let me just, For that icon to be there in that size, yes.
Right. Maybe it was a 4-finger Mickey glove on there. That's what they
right.
meant by that. I'm not quite sure, but at least at Disneyland, because they only half of the cast members that they had previously were willing to come back. Right. They had to reduce those standards. They had to expand that pool. And I think you're exactly correct when you say that some of these cast members are doing it just to get clicks on social media or to have a creative outlet for themselves or whatever. And we're seeing that not only at the cast member level, but also at various executive levels or creative levels and so forth, right? We've been seeing that. Even WDI, right? people who just don't
Absolutely.
really care about the company
Well,
and want to promote
WDI
themselves.
may be
and-
the worst.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, under Carmen Smith. Vash, I want to wind up here.
Please.
You know, it's easy for us to do this and to come across as sort of prudes who, you know, it's like, oh, you don't want to see tattoos. Oh, you don't want to see my beard dyed blue. You know, but here's the thing. This goes way farther than appearance. What I'm told by this individual is that, you know, throughout the 70s and the 80s into the 90s, Disney had great confidence in their cast members to the point that cast members were expected to maintain etiquette inside the parks. And so if they saw guests who were acting in a poor fashion, they would step in to remedy the problem, help that guest be happy once more. And if they could not be happy or if they could not be well behaved, then, you know, the door was available to them to leave, because when you went to a Disney park, it was a safe and friendly place.
Right.
Now, because the cast members there, because Disney can't trust some of them, they are not allowed to de-escalate any kind of situation. They have to wait. They have to call in for security, and they can't step in at all. And you know, this source was saying, well, actually, it's a good thing, because the cast members today, they're not qualified to help with this.
Right.
At the same time, when we see giant fights at Disney or when we see these negative PR situations, it's largely because they don't have the personnel any longer trained to solve these issues before they explode.
Yeah. And look, I love the cast members. I really do. But I have seen some who have, let's say, if a guest was having a bad day or rough time, I've seen them make that worse instead of make that better, which sometimes, might lead to some of those big incidences taking place. It's interesting. Cast members are there. The term cast member, right? You're part of the show. You're supposed to be part of the show. And so when I see these people with, you know, makeup and just like really thick makeup, right? You know, flagrant tattoos, all this kind of stuff,
or cursing, using profanities around kids in Disney World, like that. Right. I'm gonna, you know, it's not just the appearance, right? It's the character qualities that I think have taken a hit. And Vash, whereas once upon a time you went to Disney and you said 99% of the people there are awesome and 1% could use an adjustment, I think now it's like 90-10. I think 90% of the cast members are excellent, and 10% need to adjust their attitudes, their behaviors, etc. So yeah. I think that's what we're talking about. We're not saying here, folks, that, you know, 80% of the cast members are horrible people. No, we're saying that 10%, but that threshold I think has been surpassed now, where, you know, it's kind of like if you're reaching in to get an item at the grocery store. If 10% of the food is rotten, you're not going to go back to the grocery store. And I think we're getting to that point now where this needs to be resolved by Disney. Vash, final word.
Hey, cast members, part of the show. Don't make yourself the show. I'll leave it there. Disney, come on, let's get on this. Let's up our standards just a little bit. And maybe you have to increase pay a little bit to be commensurate with that. But we had to address this because the standards for the parks, whether it comes to fit and finish, whether it comes to quality of attractions, or the cast members therein, they've been falling a little bit. We can get back up on top, though.
We as a society at large have become more abrasive, more contentious, more gnarly. Folks, let's get out there and make the world better, whether you're a cast member at one of the parks, whether you work for Universal Studios, whether you're a host at Dollywood, or whether you are just a person going out on vacation and exploring the world. Wherever you are, folks, we can make the world better and make the lives of those around us improve by being the best version of ourselves. So that takes work, that takes sacrifice, but let's aim for it. All right, if you like content like this, consider clicking the like button, share, subscribe, and when you click it, you stick it to the algorithms. It's the notification bell. We here on the WDW Pro channel covet your comments. We care about your thoughts. The mind is a terrible thing to waste, so please waste not here, and instead dive into the conversation with us. Tell us the best and worst of the cast members and the services at the Disney parks. We would love to hear your thoughts, and if you think that we did poorly with this, lambast away. We'll take it, because we believe in free speech, criticism, and all that. Hopefully we'll garner just a little bit of praise. And folks, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, keep learning, keep growing, and keep having fun.
This is Wilton the Troll reporting for That's Park Place, and I'm surrounded by loving and adoring people who are peacefully trying to make sure that poor kids aren't cold in the winter. And just behind me, you can see a totally natural bonfire for baking cookies or making marshmallows.
Yeah, so, Wilson, we're really appreciate the effort and stuff, but we're looking for real and, accurate news reporting on that Park Place.
So not like most news outlets, huh?
No.